During the Second World War, there were a huge number of people who were executed for their religious beliefs or their heritage. The Nazis and pro-Nazi groups persecuted millions of people, and many were stolen from their homes and were deported to concentration camps. The conflict was the deadliest in world history, and the toll on civilian life was much greater than the military cost of life. Millions were killed, and still today many of the stories of people slaughtered by the Germans remain untold. There was no holding back, as even the most peaceful people were rounded up, and many nuns and monks and even priests were executed in their congregations, or inside of concentration camps such as Dachau. It was a horrific time of persecution, and one woman who was executed for her actions in trying to save a number of people from their deaths was Sara Salkahazi. She was a Hungarian Catholic religious sister who, on the banks of the river Danube, was shot by members of the pro-Nazi Hungarian group, the Arrow Cross Party. Join us today as we look at the horrific execution of the nun that saved hundreds from death, and remember as always to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. But first, a message from today's video sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is an app and a website that lets you see how breaking news is being covered across the political spectrum in one place. With just a swipe or a click, you can quickly compare articles from thousands of publications all around the world to see the ownership and factuality of those sources. Ground News helps expose bias in news coverage, and it's a fantastic place to see how your news is being reported. Let me show you how it works. This article here focuses on a former concentration camp worker. You can see that it's being reported by 59 different news sources, and Ground News identifies how many of them are left and right-leaning, and also how many of the sources are centre-leaning. In each article you can compare headlines to see how different places are reporting the same story, to see differences in language, and you can certainly see how language is being used to shape our understanding of breaking news. Comparing news coverage has never been easier, and Ground News has a brilliant app also, meaning it's incredibly accessible. Using Ground News, you can really see what's going on in the news and the media, and you can see what is being over-reported but also under-reported by certain media outlets. It is very eye-opening. Ground News are kindly offering our viewers a brilliant offer, and to access this, click the link in the video description down below, or click the link in the pinned comment below also. Join Ground News to see a completely different perspective on the news. Sara Salkahazi was born in Kassa, which is now found in Slovakia, on the 11th of May 1899. Her mother and father owned a hotel there, which was named after the family, and they were of German origin. However, tragedy hit Sara at a young age, as when she was 2 her father died. She was described as a tomboy with a strong will and a mind of her own, and after completing her schooling she earned a degree as an elementary school teacher. But despite this, she then went to work as a bookbinder and an apprentice. She had many other jobs and even worked inside a military shop. Then she became a journalist, and she worked for and edited the official paper of the National Christian Socialist Party of Czechoslovakia, and at this time she was not entirely religious. She would later find her calling, but at the time she even outright denied God, and she could have been considered to have been an atheist. She did get engaged also at one point to a man, but she ended their engagement rather quickly. But at some point, Sarah's religious ideas changed. She would later join the Sisters of Social Service, which had been founded by Margit Schlachter in 1912. This was a Roman Catholic religious group of women from Hungary, and they paid special devotion to the Holy Spirit. The nuns promoted workers' rights and the well-being of women and their children, and the founder was inspired by issues in society and the economy following the First World War, as thousands of people were living in poverty and in terrible conditions as the conflict had ripped through Europe. Hungary itself had lost around 60% of its lands, and Schlachter and her members would dedicate themselves to God by vows, and they involved themselves in the daily struggles of the poor. They wore simple grey suits, and their aim was to help as many people as they could, and they provided charity to the poor, and they founded schools to train social workers, and led many different women's movements. But Sarah at the time was not the most pious woman, and at first they refused to accept the journalist who was a chain smoker. But in 1929 she joined their congregation, and the following year she took vows. Her first assignment in the order was at the Catholic Charities Office, where she supervised charity work and also managed a religious bookstore, and she even published leaflets and propaganda for the group. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of Slovakia requested that Sara organise all the various Catholic women's groups to become the National Catholic Women's Association, which then established the National Girls' Movement. Sara Salkahazi became the director of this movement, and she was behind the building of the first Hungarian college for working women. But at the time across Europe, there was a huge wave of anti-Semitism and pro-Nazi beliefs sweeping across Europe and many different countries. The same was said to be happening in Hungary, and Sara, to protest against the rising Nazi ideology, changed her last name slightly to make it sound more Hungarian and less German. She continued to work as the Second World War broke out, and she opened homes for working girls, and continued to organise training courses for women. She even managed to write her own play, and she was a woman whose unbelievable energy made many people weary. Some of the sisters thought she was trying to attract attention to herself, but this was not the case. Many believed that she was not entirely devoted, and they refused to allow her to renew her temporary vows, and she even considered leaving at one point. She was not allowed to make her vows permanent, but she continued to live the life of a sister anyway, and even considered going to join the Hungarian Benedictines in Brazil. However, the Second World War would get in the way. As the Second World War rampaged throughout different countries, in Hungary they became a member of the Axis powers, and found themselves allied with fascist Italy and also Nazi Germany. They relied on the two to pull it out of depression, but many across Hungary possessed the same ideology and beliefs that the Nazis had. There was mass persecution, and by the end of the war, between 450,000 and 600,000 Hungarian Jews had been killed, with many being sent to concentration camps to face their deaths. Sara would open up during the war the working girls' homes, and in these she would provide safe haven and refuge for some Jews who were being persecuted by the Hungarian Nazi Party. In 1943 she managed to smuggle a Jewish refugee from Slovakia, disguised in her sister's habit, and the woman's son also was smuggled to safety. They were taken from the sister's house in Kassa to Budapest, where they were housed temporarily. The Gestapo were weary of women inside the religious order, and they did search the house a number of times, as they believed they were hiding Jews. But Sara continued to hide and smuggle Jews to safety, and it's believed that around 100 people were helped by her and her actions. She was the sister responsible for a house, and she made a pledge to God that she was willing to also sacrifice herself to the Gestapo and the Germans to make sure that other sisters were not harmed during the war. So she was willing to die to help other women. However, the house that Sara was working inside of was eventually betrayed. She was sheltering more Jews. However, one day the house was stormed by members of the pro-Nazi Arrow Cross Party. At the time, Sara was not in the house, and the Jews were arrested and rounded up. Sara heard that her house had been raided, and she could have fled for her own safety, but she did not, and she decided to return. But despite this, she was arrested also, and she was gathered along with the people she had saved. On the 27th of December 1944, on the banks of the Danube River, Sara was gathered with 4 Jewish women and a Christian co-worker who had been helping her. She was stood opposite a group of Hungarian executioners who were stood armed with their rifles. On the banks of the river that was flowing, the firing squad were then given their order to fire, and they quickly fired into Sara and the other women that were there. Their execution had not been planned, it was quickly and hastily arranged, and there had been no trial. Sara had indiscriminately been mown down by a hail of bullets from the pro-Nazi captors, and her body would never be recovered. It's assumed that it was pushed into the river, along with the other people she was executed with. She would later be beatified by Pope Benedict XVI, and it was said she was willing to assume risks for the persecuted in days of great fear. Her martyrdom is still topical and presents the foundation of humanity. There are calls for her also to become a saint, and a rabbi would say, "I know from personal experience how dangerous and heroic it was in those times to help Jews and to save them from death. Originating in her faith, she kept the commandment of love until death." Another writer said, "The honour bestowed by Pope Benedict XVI on Sister Sara for risking and eventually giving her life to the Jews in peril is an important statement by the Church. It is unfortunate that there were not more individuals like Sister Sara, but her example must be held up to demonstrate how lives can be saved when good people take action to confront evil." Sara's motto was "Here I am, send me," and over the years during the Second World War she tried to save as many people as she could from persecution and evil. She was a woman who was defiant in her beliefs and ideas, and she would try to do what was best for humankind in the face of one of the most oppressive regimes the world has ever seen. Her actions were brilliant and remarkable, and her story is one which deserves to be remembered. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.